And all right, guys. So welcome. We've only got 60 minutes today, so I'm going to dive straight in. Welcome to the Fascia. What is it and why you need to know about it masterclass. We are so thankful that you've decided to spend this hour with us. Now, I know that because of a slight mix-up and the UK clocks changing, that some of you are only able to attend for half an hour. That's totally fine. When you have to hop off, hop off. No need to say goodbye or excuse yourself. I'm going to be sending out the recording of today's session to you all at the end of this. And it will be valid for 7 days. Paul and I have a lot to share with you initially about fascia, about what it is, why we love it so much, why it's very important to know about for both yourself and your clients. And then if you wanted to join us and learn more about it, we're going to give you all that information at the end. Paul, do you want to say a big hi to the guys and girls?
Hello, gang. Nice to meet you all. For those who don't know me, my name is Paul Thornley. I'm a neuromuscular therapist, medical exercise specialist, and I'm based here in Dubai. And my greatest passion is understanding why we keep breaking ourselves and trying to teach people how to stop doing that so you maintain the longevity of choice and enjoy the fabulous, unique body that we all possess. And we find that out through understanding the ingredients that we're made of, not ignoring them and separating them into parts and pieces and understand how they collectively move in harmony, which is, of course, easier said than done.
Yeah. I'm just going to briefly share my screen, and then Paul and I are going to dip in and out of our screen sharing. So I'm just going to bring up a couple of things here that I have for you guys. Doop, 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 doop. Get rid of that. And I'm going to bring up this for you guys. So first of all, get rid of any distractions. This hour is yours, just that you would give to your client. Can you see that picture on your screen, guys? Thumbs up. No. Okay. Glad. Oh,
Nothing,
nothing. Is it still just me?
just you.
Good to know. Good to know. All right, let me try that again. We've only been doing this 4 years. There you go. See it?
Yep, got it.
So get rid of your vibrational devices, everybody. Get yourself a drink, get yourself a notepad. Please do take notes because there's going to be a lot thrown at you in 60 minutes. Today, we are going to go through anything like if you're feeling ill-equipped to deal with clients. And I know this is really common in classes where you've planned a class, you've planned roughly what you want to do. Even if it's a private session, you plan roughly what you want to do. And then the client that you see in front of you doesn't move how you expect them to move. And that's because they're not a machine and everybody's different. And we need to know about what they're made of and exactly how that fabric works in order to discover any restrictions, in order to understand how we work with that person a lot better. So we're going to dive into knowing about fascia, understanding fascia. I stole this from Paul the other day. And that gives you, in our humble opinions, the ability to cue more effectively. Because I don't know if you saw Paul's post the other day that is also posted to my Instagram, that knowing about fascia and understanding fascia are two different things, right, Paul? Paul?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yes. You hear me?
I was waiting for you to agree.
I agree. Most people know that it exists, but not a lot of people understand what it is. And that's where the confusion comes, and that's why there are so many other protagonists and clients and colleagues alike trying to explain it, and some are doing a really good job, and some not so much.
Yeah. So before we dive into what fascia is, Paul and I could keep you here probably for the next 6 months, minimum 24 hours a day, and talk to you about fascia and go through everything. But we do only have 60 minutes. So we're going to give you the bare basics of what it is and why you need to know about it. And then, like I say, at the end of the presentation, we will give you all the information should you want to learn more. Paul, I'm going to let you pull up your beautiful pictures. Do we need to give the guys a warning?
I'll do that now.
Story.
I'll do that now. Guys, thanks a million for coming and spending some time with us. And again, this is just my passion. I'm doing this for 25 years, learning and sharing as I learned. But what we need to understand about fascia is that it doesn't exist. It's a fabric that has been made up by an anatomist in the past. And now we all conform to this labeling system. So if we can get rid of all labels completely and have a fresh slate, then it's not like we're trying to replace something with something else. We start off with a clean slate, and then you come and you then are willing and you're open-minded to having a different interpretation of what your living tissue actually is. And then we can create different labels, and that helps us create a different way of cueing and explaining it more appropriately to each other at a certain level. And then, as we share it with our communities and our participants and our group classes, we explain it differently because we have much more clarity about it. So, just as a nutshell, how I learned about it, vast majority, like most of us did, we learned it biomechanically out of a book, and we did all the death by view slides back in the day when we didn't have lots of access to Instagram and all the rest of it. And it made no sense to me because paper is one dimensional. And if you're lucky, there might be a model in the corner. And then they get the old skeleton out and they call it all these weird and wonderful names, and Fred and Oscar and bloody you name it. And our movement is no reflection of a dead skeleton, which is held together with a pole up its ass and connected together in bits and bobs with screws and hinges. But this is how we traditionally learned our academic understanding of movement and physiology. However, then we get opportunities by my colleague and my mentor, John Sharkey, who is a clinical anatomist. And he says, Paul, come and learn anatomy in the lab. And it's amazing. If you've not done a dissection course, I urge every one of you to go there, because otherwise, as instructors, if you mimic a mechanic that only knows the outside shell of a car and knows how to buff the tires, but you have no representation of what happens beneath that surface area and how everything integrates to make it move efficiently. Likewise with the body, once you reveal what the skin is like and what's beneath the skin, and how you must sacrifice everything to reveal anything, to see anything, you have a much deeper appreciation of what we are uniquely. We are completely different to every single person on the planet. No two of us are built the same. We're similar but different. And of course, that there's a reflection then of what forces and what movement and how that movement affected how your body developed internally. So what's going to happen in the slideshow is there will be some graphic dissection from last June. I went to Italy and I've got it all on video, but I've not provided it in video in this form because that is a little bit graphic. They're still shots. Please do not take a picture of them. Please do not put them online and show them, because ethically in Europe we are not allowed to, and it will put John Sharkey in a very awkward position because he allows me to use this as educational material only. Is that deal? Must not go on Instagram just because it looks cool. And then I can then use it as educational explanations. Does that make sense? Good. If you have any questions, type them in the chat box. We'll answer what we can. But this presentation I've created, I delivered it in Abu Dhabi a few months ago, just as a practice because I was going to Malaysia. And it's just really, it's a synopsis of a broader, bigger course in Thrive and other workshops that we develop. So we'll go through it quite quickly. We won't spend a lot of detail on everything because like I say, I personally would spend another 25 years having a really great conversation with you. So let's get into that now. I'll get my presentation up. If you can watch out for hands and things like that, Victoria, in case anybody has anything to say.
Guys, any questions, pop them in the chat box and I'll organize them, collate them, and we'll try to answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. But sit back and enjoy. And vegans, you may want to look the other way.
No, not true. Humans, keep your eyes front and center. Don't be so sensitive. Remember, if you're teaching people to move, it's important you know what you're made of, because you've got these live organisms in front of you and you want to embrace them. Don't be threatened or upset or so delicate. Yes? Anyway, here we go. So we're looking at our main slide there. And of course, we want the theme of our existence is to thrive. Yeah? Our job as humans is to thrive within our environment, wherever that may be. And your body needs to perform within that environment really efficiently and effortlessly. When we ask our body to tolerate huge amounts of strain and stresses, whether it's emotional or physical, and often we try to do that in the vain hope of using the health and fitness industry to give us more longevity. And unfortunately, the health and fitness industry destroys our efficiency of movement. And that's why we have now created and sustained a zillion-dollar industry called the rehabilitation industry. So as one feeds the other, we have to ask ourselves, where is our role within it? So if we are 100% not musculoskeletal, then what are we? And that's the question you'll want to ask yourselves. Remember, my job is not to change your mind. My job is to share with you how I've created my opinion. And if it opens some windows of curiosity and you feel like changing your own mind, then we're welcome to discuss that further. But we are most certainly myofascial tissue that is neurologically stimulated, that creates a chemical response to create activity until we pass away. So ultimately, we are an embryo from beginning to end, but the moment you're born, you're designed to die. And this is a strange concept for people to understand. It's important that you are thriving while you're alive because it's such a short time frame. But understanding how these tissues develop over that span is very, very important. And so we understand that muscles and fascia, although they are closely related, as in they work together, they develop very differently because they have different roles within our movement and physiology. So as a synopsis, muscle has got nothing to do with movement. Muscles do not make you move. Muscles create force. And as they create force, they then tension the fascia, very much like you play a guitar. So if the strings of the guitar represent the fascial tissue, then your thumb comes along and it creates a contracture that creates a vibration within that fascial tissue, which then collectively creates a resonance and frequency that emits emergent properties. And for us as humans, that is where you see them movement exist. Does that make sense? But all too often we're told we must have muscle mass. But if you build too much muscle and within that fascial arrangement, what happens is you try to dominate the area with too much force, and the fascia responds. Instead of moving in harmony, it defends itself by thickening further. And you'll notice later as you see that fascia is your form and your architectural shape. So the shape that you are is directly related to how you've asked it to perform and create shape for you to allow you to move. So the phrase we use is muscles don't contract, muscles tension fascia. So then what you do, then you go, well, how do I explain that to my clientele? And I would encourage you to use an analogy or a metaphor like I just used, the instrument, because we are a harmonic instrument that plays tunes in tune, ideally. But more often than not, we make ourselves go out of tune by disregarding one tissue in favor of another. Biomechanics is an explanation of the musculoskeletal system based on hard matter physics of dead tissue. And this was a foundation of understanding anatomy, which was created nearly, well, over 400 years ago. And if you look at the phones that are in your hands now or at the side of your table, they have changed in the last 400 days more than anatomy has changed in the last 400 years. And that should raise questions for us. Why is technology allowed to advance and evolve, but our understanding of the living form is stationary? So as far as we're concerned, you are not mechanical in any way because we are not a machine. It was words that they fit the time and place for when it was invented back in the Industrial Revolution, back in when we had columns and beams and pulley systems. And it was just what the anatomists of the day could see to use in a convenient way to explain what they didn't understand. As an example, René Descartes was a horologist. He was one of the first people to do dissections, and he was a clockmaker. And he thought he would take all the parts away and create all these parts as he cut and dissected. And then he thought he'd put them all back together. Then we have a human. But no, you have a dead human still that is now in parts and pieces, rather than a watch or a clock that you built out of parts and pieces. And if you organize them well, then it would function in a nice, efficient way as a machine. But a machine we are not. What we are, though, is a series of forces, which is best explained through the model of tensegrity. Now, tensegrity is an architectural explanation of compression and tensional forces and how they manage their relationship together to maintain overall architectural integrity so that buildings don't fall over. When you apply that to the living form, there are three forces in the world. There is compression, which is globally universal and measurable, and then there is a tensional reaction to that compressive force. And out of those two, you then get the third, which is emergent properties. And that is movement and life at an organic level. But you need the three to create anything. If you only have the two, then it's not human. It is not organic. It is not born out of nature. It is born out of man-made structures. Does that make sense? We go that in more detail later if you wish. But then you'll notice there's another term at the base there. This is a really important one because we are evolving the understanding of anatomy, and we call it the new anatomy in motion. And you might see this delivered soon in a place called the Fascia Hub. There's a huge presentation called the British Fascia Symposium, and they're delivering it en masse from all the experts. But it's fascia integrity in motion. And what fascia, once we understand what fascia is, you'll recognize that it animates these tensile forces in living tissue. But we have to really establish what is fascia so that we can redefine and re-explain the terminology of fascia so that that makes sense to you. Because most people will assume that fascia is a connective tissue, that fascia is a binding or wrapping. It joins one element of your body to another. This, unfortunately, is not the truth because nothing was ever disconnected. You grew yourself in the one, in the round, in the wholeness. There was never any extra material brought in to create you. You grew yourself. You self-regulated. You self-developed as the one. So if there's no disconnection, how can we be connected from one area to another? So again, when you look at it at a slightly different perspective, you start to appreciate the relationships in your body rather than the connections, i.e. the pelvis. There is no pelvic floor. There's only one floor, and you stand on it. And we talk about something I created called the pelvic foot. And it's your foot relationship with the energy it receives from the ground that is then force transmitted through the pelvis. And now you have a different relationship altogether because they're not separate. Remember, your big toe grew from your sacrum. And your sacrum is the roof of the pelvis, not the back door. We'll talk about that in another workshop. But in a nutshell, fascia is your proprioceptive tissue. So if it's not connective, what is it? Well, it is everything. We just label things separate to give ourselves like a GPS map. It gives us locations. It allows us to identify a region, what we've seen, and we're trying to interpret how people are moving or listening to our cues and how they're reflecting our cues in their movement choices. However, what I want you to know is that your fascia is directly related for you to understand where you are in space. And that tissue that's responsible for that is your superficial fascia. And this is important that we understand the difference between superficial and deep and where they're located within your living body. So you're going to see shortly in the dissection clips that I show you. I want you to understand when you see them that it was cut in a certain way to reflect where these receptors are, where they're located, and how we treat that tissue, whether it's training, nutritional, or psychologically, it influences how they perform. So fascia is your tissue of proprioception. Where am I in space and how am I interacting with my environment? It is also your tissue of interoception, your gut reaction, how you feel about something intuitively, how you feel about something subconsciously. For instance, you don't become hungry, you just are hungry. Yes, you don't become upset, you are upset. You don't become happy, you are happy. And you do that without thinking about it. You just react naturally to your company, your environment, or your activities, whether it's joyful or threatening. It's interoceptively received in your gut and through your skin. Yes? So for instance, there's a lot of neuroanatomy out there, and it's fabulous. But the brain is not a computer that we program and it commands us what to do. The brain is a library of our actions. You weren't taught how to walk. You learned how to walk by doing it. And then you informed your brain to organize and compartmentalize how you went through that process. And it remembers. Yes, but it can also be misleading because your gut and your brain grew at the same rate and with the same tissue. The lining of your gut is made out of the same direct material as your brain. So it's no surprising we have a gut instinct before we ever actually intellectually try to work something out. And this is very important. You do not learn things intellectually. You learn them instinctively when you're learning to do something. Yes, and this, again, changes our interpretation of the living body and how we teach it to learn. So we stop, when we're cueing, stop telling people what to do. You invite them to do it. Stop telling them what to feel. Stop hijacking their experience. Let them reflect how they feel. This will be a different style of cueing to you. It is the largest sensory organ in your body. This is very important you understand that. There is no memory in muscles. You cannot have muscle memory in a tissue that doesn't have memory cells in it. There are no librarians in the muscle. However, there are receptors in the fascial tissue, and there are 10 times more receptors there, sensory receptors, that are stimulated, that are innovated, that are responsive to experience. Way before you ever ask your brain permission to move, you are moving. Yes. However, if your brain has a memory of a poor action, it will instinctively stop you or make you move, whether that's appropriate or not. So there's this communication going on. There's this feedback loop. But fascial neural speed and central nervous speeds are different. And sometimes the information you get through your body and through your contact and through your environment, it doesn't get time to go to the brain to get permission to move. You just move instinctively as you need to. Yes, but your fascia is your interface with everything. And this brings us on to haptics. So I don't know if you know this, but in your phone, you have haptics. You can see it on your phone. We now have a way of explaining it in real life, yes? And what they are, it's an interface. So for instance, on your phone, how you touch it creates a different reaction through it. If you swipe, if you tap, if you drag, it creates a different reaction. Well, our body is the same. How you make contact with somebody, if you hug, if you're palpating and you're proprioceptively helping somebody with your hands, if they're using a prop, a proprioceptive influence, an external influence, it has an internal effect. This is important we understand that your fascia is interacting with everything all of the time. And how we interpret that information requires time because your fascia is the tissue of temporality. It requires time to understand and it requires time to develop and adapt. Makes sense? But it also expresses your uniqueness of form. What does that mean? We are all uniquely grown by ourselves and our interaction with other people and other environments. So you have to ask yourself, why does somebody have a certain shape? And why am I trying to make them symmetrical like the robot? Because we're told we're biomechanical and your shoulders should be in a similar position. We should have symmetry in our body. Well, what's the truth? We are uniquely asymmetrical. And instead of making people symmetrical and robotic, we want to make them efficient in their shape, in their form, in their ability to move, and make sure that we're just guiding and making sure we avoid unnecessary pressure and unnecessary force transmission through the body that is creating victims within the relationships, i.e. a bad back, i.e. a herniation. There's 1,000 explanations out there and examples. Makes sense? But most importantly, it must be in tune. It's a frequency driven. It emits light and energy. Some would say light, energy, and love, because we're a loving creature. We like to embrace people, embrace our lives. Yes, when you're sad and you're feeling anxious, you don't express movement. You try to not move. And the whole point about being a human being is we want to embrace movement and quality of movement. So whatever you love doing, do lots of it, even sometimes if it's threatening to your body, because your body is enjoying it. But essentially, fascia is you. It's an explanation of who you are and how you became. How's that?
Great. Guys, please remember any questions in the chat box. Sorry, Paul.
That's good. Yeah, ask them. So here we go. So in a nutshell, this is the artist's impression of fascia. You'll see in the bottom the ghost heart where it's been decellularized, which means we removed all of the muscular proteins completely. But look, you're still left with the architectural shape of the heart. If you were to do it the other way around and remove the fascia, you just have a blob of mush. There would be no shape whatsoever. Muscle only creates force. It does not create shape. It dictates to fascia how it will respond. And it often does it inappropriately. You'll see there above, you'll see that layering as it's been dissected into different depths throughout the tissue. There is no layer in tissue. We are basically architectural fabric like origami. There is one piece of us and it's folded and formed and invaginated to create space and opportunities for things to grow within. But there is no separation. Yes, everything is directly grown within everything else. Just like in the sea, the ocean, the fish grow in the sea. Yes, the fish aren't grown and the sea surrounds them. They're intertwined and interrelated directly from the minute one. So it is our architecture. It is the most ubiquitous tissue within the body. Ubiquitous means everywhere. It is everywhere. So if it's everywhere, it must be everywhere. It can't be a surrounding tissue. It is intertwined within the tissue. It's what the tissue grows in and amongst and forms between and around and through. Makes sense? This is one of my real bugbears when people do neural flossing, as if the nerve travels through a separate funnel and you can floss it like you floss your teeth with an external piece of tissue. This is not how nerves do. And when you do that, the reason it requires some sort of movement is because it's become abrasive and it's lost its ability to glide. And what you do, you then start pulling and flossing and you create more abrasion, which creates more inflammation, which creates more need for the rehabilitation world to join in your life. Be careful. Makes sense? So that's just a synopsis of some things it does. But the gliding one is very important. Our bodies are not meant to slide against each other. Our tissues are not meant to slide against each other. Our bodies are meant to have an environment that is within them, and it's made of a thing called hyaluron. Yes, and hyaluronic tissue is the environment that allows all other tissues amongst it to be gliding, like sugar. Yes, like chocolate. Yes, not like glue. Glue tacks down and pulls tissue that is orientated to go in one direction, and it pulls it and dictates it's going to go somewhere else. And that's when you then end up with inhibition, and you end up then with dysfunction and limitation of movement in certain directions. You see this in weightlifters a lot. So we're now moving on to some of the pictures. I just give you a forewarning of this. I did everything you're about to see now for the first 2 slides. I did everything. I was very lucky in Cremona to have a cadaver to myself, and I was watched and supervised by other people. But I was lucky enough to do all this work, and it was some of the finest work I've done in 10 years, as I normally do 2 to 3 of these a year. I was super chuffed. However, it was my first time ever. So when they do preservations of body, they often use a different process of preservation. So formaldehyde is where it dries out. And that's why when you see cadavers have been secured with formaldehyde, they're quite dry. And you can make specific cuts and you can have definite separations of tissue. And you can show this mythical layering and these origin insertions that you can create with a knife, because they don't exist except in the imagination of the anatomist with a scalpel or the artist with a pencil. They must be formed and created and sacrificing everything else around them. However, this one was fresh frozen, this cadaver, this specimen. I was very lucky. So they literally defrosted and you get it as they are, as their tissue is. And this received my blade beautifully and my skillful application. And what we just had while we were on this particular course in Cremona was a presentation from Professor Carla Stecco. And she was explaining to us about the superficial fascia and how it was often disregarded as insignificant, but it lives in this superficial layer of your adipose tissue just beneath the skin. And now we understand it much more clearly. You'll see what I've done there. I wanted to reflect her presentation in the cadaver that we were lucky enough to have. So I took one side and my colleague, Dr. Kirkness, did the other side. Her cadaver work was not as delicious as mine. However, what I did, as you see there, I have not made any damage to the deep fascia, yes, the epimycin that surrounds your abdominal tissue. You'll see it's just nice and beautiful and shiny. But what I have done, I've reflected all the way back the superficial dermis and the adipose tissue and the superficial fascia that lives within, right to the central line known as the linea alba, you'll know it as. Now, why is that important? Because superficial fascia is what interacts with our external world. It's what lets us know that we're in an environment and whether we should be joyful, threatened, anxious, or as a warning. Yes? So it lets us know that. But how does it communicate with the deep fascia so that we understand proprioception of activity, how we change shape to interact and do things? Well, it happens right down the central line of the body, right down that linea alba. That's why it's very important that it's there. We have integrity there, because that communication goes right through to the central part of the spine. It then also communicates at what we call joints, yes, which are basically resting points of movement. But what you consider them to be joints is where the superficial fascia has a communication and a dialogue internally with the deep fascia to let you know where your arm or your leg or your action is occurring and should it move freely, or should it be anticipating threat? Does that make sense? So as we did this, then I went from here and then we started to remove elements to go further down until we ended up at the spine and removed the lungs and heart, and we're able to have the heart in my hand. So you'll notice as I'm there in the top corner, I begin. I create what I've just shown you on the first slide. And the third one at the top is me, where I've reflected the rib cage like you would lift a trunk or the bonnet of a car to see the engine. So I cut down the side of the rib cage and I just lifted it up gently to reveal the lungs and the diaphragm. Yeah, and you'll see there on the bottom left-hand corner, that is the diaphragmatic tissue from underneath that rib cage. You see, and you'll see how it's bound to the ribs. And what then you see in the next picture is all of the intestines and the ginormous amount of tissue that we keep attacking with by training the mythical core, which of course doesn't exist in a human body, but that's another conversation. In the center there now, you'll notice where we removed all of the viscera, all of the organs, and placed them into that bucket that you see in the back corner to reveal the central artery that comes all the way down the spine. You see that? And then you might see, if you're lucky, in the bottom left and bottom right, your psoas tissue. Now, your psoas tissue, as you know them as hip flexors, yes, it's very important that you understand where they're located in reality rather than in a book, because your psoas is incorrectly named. It cannot be the flexor of your hip. Is it involved in flexion of the hip? Sure, to a certain degree. But its major role, its major structural role and its functional role is a diaphragmatic tensioner. What that means is like a canopy of a umbrella or a canopy of a parachute. Those pull tensions that come down come from the psoas major so that you can breathe in opposition. Does that make sense? Then they're very important. And we often try to stretch them way too much. But again, we'll talk about that as our workshop continues and into other opportunities as we go. And my last one, my favorite one, and this was my whole intention, was to get to the heart. And the heart lives in the pericardial sac. And I was able to just create a nice little incision, put my hand in and remove it and have it just in my hand. And it was just amazing to get to that degree of finesse without, although I've sacrificed everything, we were able to go on this lovely journey from skin to organs. But look at what I've done to get there. I've had to sacrifice everything along the way to get to that level of depth and separation. And this is how you're taught generally, traditionally, in your anatomy. And this is just not true. Yes, the heart doesn't exist in your chest when you're alive. It only exists there when you're dead. The brain does not only exist in your head, only when you're dead, and we remove it. Your brain is body-wide. Your heart is body-wide. When you're excited, you feel it in your bum. When you're in love, you feel it in your chest. When you're anxious, you feel it in your gut. When you're sweaty and you're not sure and you're excited, it's in the palms of your hand. Yes? Nothing exists in isolation in the body. But we've just got so used and into the habit of conforming to what people say about the body and believing it without questioning it. So it's important you always ask why, so that you have clarity about what you're being told to share and why it's important. This is, again, this is not my cadaver. This is somebody else. I saw this take place in Germany. And this is if you like, a slice of the torso there on the left to reveal, as you're looking down at it, the circular tissue, you'll notice that there's the fat and the adipose tissue on the outside. On the left-hand side, you'll notice there is your rectus abdominis. At the sides is transverse abdominis and your obliques. And at the back, of course, is your paraspinal and erector spinae. And in between, and where it's all red and yellow, that's your viscera. But where is your transverse abdominis? Because it is super thin and it's right against that visceral tissue. And yet we traditionally try to tighten that like a belt. And this is just the most ridiculous approach to lumbar stability. However, we get to that later, why we have a different approach now. But also understanding that they call the rectus abdominis, your front abdominals, they call it the stupid muscle. And it's also your deepest anterior tissue in the body. Here is me doing a knee. So now you get to see a knee, and I want you to look at this so that you're looking from the perspective of what you consider a joint to be. So you'll notice in the center picture there, we've taken the knee and made it go into three pieces. Are we all good?
Mhm.
Okay, good. So you can see it's in three pieces, and we've kept that central piece where you get to see the head of the femur and the head of the tibula, where their relationship comes. And you'll notice it's very yellow between the bones, and that's really soft and spongy. So even though it's a dead person, it's considered a healthy bone. And then you'll have of course, the calcified hardness on the outside. And we consider bone to be starched fascia because you grew yourself. And this is very important that we don't think that bones are a skeletal system that things attach to and are attachment sites of other structures. Your bones grew with you and they grew under tension. That's why your fingers come up like a limb bud and they expand outward. Yes? They're not attached into. But anyway, I thought you might like that. I love that. And what that is, that was a process on the right-hand side there. They tried to create a full-size cadaver that reflected over 30 variations of fascia that was preserved and now resides in Berlin. And I happened to be taken to Gunther von Hagen's laboratories, and we were given another cadaver, and these were we got it all separated, and I was lucky enough to do the right knee, and then that's there for educational purposes to see how the fascial arrangement goes through the knee, and we did it on all over another particular cadaver. So if we have a different perspective of fascia, is living tissue designed to stretch? And this is a absolute kettle and minefield, but the two differentiations between the world of biomechanics and the world of fascia integrity is that the two words stretch and strength are misinterpreted in our opinion. Your body is designed not to fall. You're designed to recover and thrive in your environment and have the ability to rebound. Your body is naturally anti-stretching by design and function. Because if it only knew how to stretch, you wouldn't recover. You would always fall over too easily. So it's important that we differentiate between flexibility and mobility, and not stability, but constraints of appropriate natures and specificness. But anyway, it's a great topic, and we talk about it a lot in our workshops. But as a summary to the mechanical, and hopefully this is making you think, wow, how am I going to transition? I promise you it's not that hard. You just have to be willing to. But if you look at why you're told you're mechanical and look at the variations, you'll see that biomechanics is based in two dimensionals. It's based in lever-based mechanics, where there are no levers in the body. There is leverage, but there's no levers because they are two-bolt open chain things. It's based in hard matter physics, not soft matter organism. It's symmetrically focused, linear motion, and it's basically a map of parts and pieces that are never integrated. We have leg day, back day, bum day, ab day. We call that dysfunctional day. Makes sense? But biomechanics is man-made, and it's an explanation for the convenience of explanation. So what about joints? Are the joints? And you see here, these are all relatives and friends of mine who have suffered through their own activities and their vibrant lives they've led. But you'll notice that there should be always a virtual space. You grew yourself. Only now when we start having to have interference from the medical world, do we turn into the Terminator and get things attached and adding more compression by screwing things together that have become dysfunctional and separate, either through a break or through over compression, and now they've ruptured or they have become traumatized. And then we have to have the medical world come in and then put things back together with these artificial screws and bolts and braces. And unfortunately, what they do, they're adding more compression. And if compression wins, we always lose. If compression wins in space, you die. If compression wins on the land, you die. Ask any mouse in a mousetrap. And if compression wins in the sea, as you go down atmospherics, you implode. And this is important you understand these forces. We are a tensional bias structure. So we must ensure that this compressive force is not overwhelming us and that we have the ability to move and create the tensional response so that we can embrace those forces and move freely. which is why it's important we avoid words like neutral, and we try to anchor in pelvic position or stabilize and immobilize our body during movement, because that's not helpful and it's not natural. What that is man-made mechanics to take excessive force to manage it, rather than embrace the fact that we want to be moving more organically and more freely. So we access the ability to rebound, recoil, release, restore, and refine ourselves. We'll get to that later. But you'll notice those bones should not come closer together. But even in the process of trying to establish integrity with these foreign objects, they're trying to add compression, because that's the medical way, is to restore integrity by doing it mechanically, which is compression. But as an organism, we are designed to create expansion, and this will then limit that. And of course, this now leads not only to helping something that's been traumatized, but it now leads to adaptation throughout the whole body, which can lead to other things we'll have to address.
And I also think, Paul, even if just looking at that picture, and a lot of people will know that have bolts and pieces of titanium and metal in them, it actually restricts your movement, and we're designed to move.
Well, that's what I've just said. If you're pulling two things together, you're restricting it from having the ability to create space. And we need space to move freely, because the more you restrict it, the more you create more inflammation. And remember, to get that in there, you have to cut the skin. And we've already seen by me cutting the skin that you're sacrificing integrity to get through the skin. Yes, and you'll notice if you cut yourself, elastic recoils, it bounds open, because we are a bound structure. Yes, and then you put those in, and now you create scar tissue to insert those. So that's, again, going to make your body like almost like you grab a cloth, you're going to curl it up and scrunch it. And now it's pulling not only immediately, you may get this lovely, beautiful surgical scar on the outside, but if you go inside, as we see on many, many, many cadavers and many specimens, it's literally chaos inside, where the fibers are being drawn inwards from all directions. Under a microscope, it looks like an old medieval warship that's crashed in the Coral Sea, and you just have got no orientation of the fibers of the wood. That's what it looks like under a microscope. It's very important we try to avoid this as much as we can, but if we get it, we need to know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
So in my world, exercise is not medicine. As far as I'm concerned, human people are not designed to exercise. We are, however, designed to move incredibly well, and there is a world of difference. Yes, if exercise was so good, nobody would be injured. There would be no rehabilitation industry at all. There would be no Pilates. There's no need for yoga, no need for any soft tissue release. There'd be nothing. But let's be honest, it's absolute nonsense that we go in and torture ourselves for a short period of time, yes, for the benefit of our long-term longevity. And this overwhelming obsession with pain, an overwhelming obsession with aesthetic looks, is destroying your freedom. And let's be honest, vast majority of people in the world don't exercise. It's a very small percentage of people that are in these facilities, but each and every one of them is moving dysfunctionally and promoting more dysfunction. And our role is to spot that and help them out as much as we can for the ones that want to listen. Because like health and safety, nobody wants it until they require it. So it's important that we are trying to be pre-rehab so that rehab is not required, rather than always relying on the rehabilitation world to help us manage the consequences and the ramifications of not paying attention to ourselves. Because if you just think you're strengthening muscle, I guarantee you, you're destroying your myofascial body. So this is just again a précis of things to be mindful of. Like poor technique and overtraining, creates repetitive strain. You're just wearing yourself out. Yes, if the sports elite who have access to all of the rehabilitation equipment in the world and all of the specialists, and they all retire in their 30s, but we base our long-term health benefits off their short-term successes. So I call the modern day sports athlete the old star gladiators. They are, what's the word we're looking for? They are basically, they're there to entertain us. This is that simple, until the more younger, less injured elite star comes along to take their place, to entertain us more. They're all expendable. But we often base our training protocols on our stars that we see on TV and the people we try to emulate. This can be a massive mistake. And as we see, we've gone from bending back up to where we are. We want to be somewhere in between. Remember, all movement comes from really good movement, yes, and creating natural strength. Whereas in gymnasiums and in Pilates and in yoga and all these artificial modalities, We tend to create specific strength in a specific environment to do a specific thing. Yes? And I always equate this to nature. You will never see a fish cycling a bicycle, even if you put the bike in the river. It will have no idea what to do with it because it's a fish. But we keep putting ourselves in these environments and trying to mimic them. Yes. And ultimately, what you do, you create an architectural change, and your body will have to conform to that shape to perform in that environment, which limits it in a global environment of nature. We've just disassociated ourselves from the natural world too much. And we live in these buildings that are all straight lines and mostly made of metal. So what are we? 21st century anatomy and physiology came from the understanding of biotensegrity from Dr. I forget his name now. He'll come back to me later. And he was a surgeon. What's his name now? Dr. Levin. Stephen Levin. And he is the one that realized that as he was sat having his dinner in the Smithsonian and he saw this lovely ginormous skeleton of a dinosaur. How did that move? If that skeletal system is true and biomechanics is our way of explaining movement, how did that move? And that opened his door to curiosity. And as he understood it, when we overcompress things, we kill movement. But when we invite tensional responses through an appropriate compression, we embrace movement. But this is what it's based on. It's modern research of embryonic beginnings. It's based on soft tissue, living matter. Yes, it's about architectural tensegrity and those forces of compression and tension that then equal to emerging properties through living tissue. We create a global continuity where there is no separation, there is no connection, there is just an enhancement of relationships through hierarchical. It is hierarchical, there is things that are in charge and there is things that take priority, but they work in order together. No legs exist. You are one. And all joints must remain floating within virtual spaces at all times. They often don't. Fascia integrity, this is how we talk about movement, and it's based on the laws of nature, not mechanics. Make sense? And it's just another explanation of some of the key points there that you need to know about what you're made of and how it truly should be behaving in your life. But everything in your body is round and tubular. We move in spirals of chirality, which means everything in your body must move in a counter rotation to its neighbor. From the skin on your big toe to the tongue in your mouth, everything counter rotates to create space like you take a lid off a bottle. If the lid and the bottle go the same direction, that's called shearing. When you shear, you create inflammation. When you create inflammation, you create now dysfunction, and then you invite a physio to go and buy his new Jeep at your expense. So if you look at the animals, I love this picture. It really just made me smile. Because none of these guys try to be humans. They don't know what you're talking about. They might mimic if they spend long enough in your time. Like the meerkats, they're on TV, they're famous. But we try to train to be kangaroos all the time. We do so many squats, but nobody walks. I don't understand it. Makes sense? So understand, we are specifically designed to move us in a specific way, and we're very good at it, but we try to emulate everything else that doesn't move like a human. This is just bonkers, quite frankly. So we are very specifically organized to move in a specific way in a specific environment. Yes? But which animal are you mimicking? Which one do you prefer? Are you the bendy snake? Are you the big gorilla? Are you the cheeky monkey? And it's okay to be one of all of them, but at least understand why you're choosing to move a certain way, because form, your shape, governs your movement function, and your functional movement will change how your form develops. And you've got to make sure that you bought that you're in for that, because often you're doing these things without realizing the consequences of your movement choices. So in my world, we do not exercise. We create movement patterns, because exercise damages living tissue. So it's important that we identify how somebody moves. Don't stop them, just seek, is it serving them? Is it serving their shape and their environment they exist the most in? Yes? And then help them organize that movement pattern so it becomes optimal for them. Yeah? Make sure you sequence in micro movements. Micro movements is the key to changing everything significantly. If you have a significant change at a micro level, you can then go a macro play. But we're so desperate to do things big and hard and complex and advanced, we forget that the subtlety is where the most dynamic, significant changes occur. Yes, and there are 5 keys which we'll go into on various courses and workshops that we provide for you to see that. But it is prehab, so that rehab is never ever required. So just as an example, I do jujitsu. I do it as every day if I can. Jiu-jitsu is a traumatic, brutal effect on your body. Yes. However, I do this and I go tomorrow pain-free because I make sure that my tissue has the capacity to heal and repair in a timely fashion because I understand the timely nature of how my body needs to resynthesize should I damage it. And we share this and make sure that everybody can have that opportunity. But most people accumulate and they bang dysfunctional movement until their movement is inhibited and the very thing they enjoy doing they can't do. And then they go seeking third party help. This is something we'd like to influence and try to change if possible. Make sense? But understanding the differences between biomechanics and fascia integrity motion is what makes the most significant difference in the communities and lives of ourselves, our families, and our participants who we're lucky enough to influence. So bear that in mind, guys, please, if you could, that you'll avoid exercising and just focus on how you are moving.
Awesome.
That's my little presentation. I hope it was okay. I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you. I'm just going to share this. Guys, you will have heard Paul in his amazing presentation where I'm sure you're all kind of like, oh my God, there's so much to take in. That's normal to be feeling that way after that, trust me. You heard him mention probably every single one of these, the pelvic foot, the lymphatic system, scars, foot and ankle, and we have put 12 modules together, 12 individual workshops they started out as, but we decided that they fitted together so well that we wanted to give you all 12 and show you how they interlink and how they mesh, because just like the body, there are no parts and pieces. So in this call, we started these as workshops. We've now put them all together to develop what we call Thrive, which is our 12-week intensive mentorship. And I say intensive in air quotes because it really is, not in a bad way, but you get 12 modules. I would say approximately 2 hours each one. You also get 12 months access to them, because what we found is, if the last hour is anything to go by, the amount of information that you take on board is a lot, and it is a lot of depth as well as a lot of information. So we've now done, I think, 4 intakes or maybe even 5, Paul, of Thrive. And we only take 10 participants each course that we do. We do 1 course a year on average. And this is the welcome and the open, if you like, today of the 2024 intake. We actually have a couple of people signed up already without even attending this workshop. They were just like, yep, I want in. So we actually have 8 places available for this year's Thrive course. It covers all of these 12 modules, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit more
Before we explain this, can we answer some of the questions, because that make them want to sign up?
Yeah. So there are questions. One of them is about diving in a little bit deeper to what you went, Paul. So if there's no connections, then
Bring
why
up the thing. Can we remove this? I can't see.
Hang on. Let me stop sharing.
Good better.
Sam says, I would love to chat a bit more. I know, Sam. That's why we're inviting you to join Thrive. Some of the experts in the area, you understand everything is one, so there is no connection, but would love to dive more. So it's not a specific question, but it's just wanting to go deeper. That one.
Well, that's why we created 12 modules to show you that we can talk about systems and areas individually, but it's important that you understand integration, that they are integral to each other and they're integrated into how they perform. And this is very important that we change our language so that we change our explanation and understanding of it. For instance, there was a question there about alignment.
Yeah,
and alignment is a huge thing.
Just let me read that from Latifa. It was a really great
question.
Because I think particularly those of you that are Pilates instructors on the screen, we talk a lot about alignment. And as Paul mentioned in the presentation, both shoulders should be the same height and the scapula should be in the same place. And we measure them and do all this malarkey. And actually, maybe that used to be true, but perhaps not so much anymore. And Latifa, who I do know for a fact is a Pilates instructor, says if we do move freely without proper alignment, doesn't that add compression onto certain joints?
No. So imagine a tree that grows in itself, yes? You do not have the branches symmetrically going at the same rate, at the same distance, with the same thickness. You don't have the same amount of leaves and the same amount of budding on each end. They grew depending on their environment. And the problem is with humans, you're trying to make them machinery in the Pilates and yoga and other worlds of training. We are not symmetrical. and we don't receive pressure equally on each side. We are a rotational structure. Everything in your body is round. Scoliosis is not a dysfunction. Scoliosis is a shape change. Every spinal shape that you can name, kyphotic, lordotic, sway back, military, they're just a description of shape. Yes? When you see the ideal alignment, that is a unicorn. It doesn't exist. But if you find one, catch it, put a net over it, we'll study it more. But they do not exist, but you try to make them exist in the room. And this is a mistake because now you're forcing people to conform rather than be individually unique and understand themselves. And what we have to do is understand where the extra strains and stresses are, and we guide them and help teach them how to manage their shape when we invite force and compression and motion. And yes, and too often, we forget that position is key, that sequencing is vital, and you invite intensity to test your skill and ability to do things instinctively. What we are so desperate to do is we use data and scientific evidence, and you're dictating shape and movement protocols and degrees and ranges of movement into a very unique and organic and individually grown person. No two people move the same on the planet. We move similarly. No two tissues are built the same inside. They're same but different. And we have to honor that by how we see and interpret people. And you can get people to do the most incredible movements, but not everybody will move the same way, and nor should they. Which is why we don't use imprint, neutral, stabilize, engage, squeeze, align, because it makes no sense. You're telling them what to do rather than inviting them to experience. Yeah? Who says your legs have to be parallel? Ankle and hips, ankle and knees hip distance apart. Who? Who said that? You know why? Because you're trying to conform an army of people, a herd of people, a community, to make sure you guide them. But you're taking away the uniqueness of them. And then we create dysfunctional people. They ultimately become more dysfunctional. We've spent so much time lying on our backs. We are misguiding ourselves thinking we're getting stronger in a vertical world. And the vast majority of people that lie on their backs and find it beneficial and comforting is because they're absolutely exhausted in life. And the moment you say lie on your back, they go, thank God for that. No wonder it feels comfortable. Yes, but you cannot get stronger in a vertical world as a vertical structure by training on your back. You just mislead yourself and misguide yourself to thinking you're getting stronger, and you're creating all of these lovely integral strengths, why lumbar and pelvic stability, and I've got this great pelvic floor and I've got this great ability to breathe, but when you come upright, you can't walk, you can't balance. This is bonkers, and it needs a change, and that's why we're changing. We are making significant challenges to everything you thought about movement, to give you the opportunity to challenge what you think you knew so you can explain it better and you have more conviction in what you're saying.
And we teach you guys all of this inside of Thrive. So yes, today was very theory-based, but we have, outside of the 12 modules that are theory-based, and within them actually, we do movement sessions. So to show you that not everything has to be done lying on your back. So we do movement sessions on our fortnightly calls, which we have. So every fortnight we have a live Q&A. Yes, they are recorded if you're on a weird and wonderful time zone or just can't make it because life happens. But we do really urge you to come to the lives, because this is where Paul and I thrive, when we can see you guys on the screen and we can bounce off you guys with your wonderful questions. Paul, we have one more question and then we're going to wrap up.
Go for
Alison
it.
says, as a ballet teacher, how do I approach stretching with my students, knowing it's not good for them, but it is also a requirement for certain aspects of ballet?
Okay, good. So me and Alicia know each other because she trains with me twice a week and has done for many years. And so she should know better. I hope she's answering this question for the benefit of others. So, ballet dancers, firstly, are they social dancing or are they likely to become professionals? If they're likely to become a professional dancer, yes, your job is to abuse yourself so you can ballet dance, knowing that the consequences are you are going to have a dysfunctional hip, pelvis, spine, foot, neck, and shoulder. You are compromising your integrity to perform. I deal a lot with ballet dancers, both amateur and professional. I've been at the big shows where the world stars come, and the moment they come off stage looking so glamorous and effortless and graceful, literally bodies go into shock and trauma in the wings. So the thing is, you've got to ask yourself a question. why am I stretching tissue beyond its natural boundaries? So whatever you're doing, it must be beneficial to you. For instance, why don't horses stretch when they're going to play polo? Because it's a horse. It's made of the same material we are. You'll never see a horse post polo match doing a hamstring stretch. It will be rubbing its ass against the fence, hoping somebody rubs it with a brush and gives it some hay to eat to reward it. And it will get patted down and it will get told to go on a nice trot to cool down and to regather and pant and evacuate the excessive heat so it doesn't die. We do stretching pre-exercise and post-exercise. And if stretching worked, why are all ballerinas and all gymnasts and vast majority of martial artists and most sports people, why are they injured at all then? There should be zero injuries if stretching is so good for us. Nobody should have any dysfunction because there's so much of it done. And the fact is, we are not designed to stretch living tissue. Its very characteristics are to prevent you stretching. If there's a room and there's a bang outside now, if without shocking you, it's an example. But if a car backfired or somebody beat the horn or I go bang like that, you don't go, you go, and you curl up, yes? Because it's your very nature to survive and curl. Your tissues are designed to shorten under threat. They're not designed to expand. Why teach stretching at all? What we teach and what you should teach is understanding that animals pandiculate only from sleep. They do it once, they make sure the mouth goes wide and they reach, and they stimulate their myofascial neurology so they're ready to go and be active in the world. They do it once and once only from rest, from sleep, not from chilling out in the sun. Make sense? Humans, we've made it an activity. We do stretching classes. There's even buildings that says stretch.com. I call that come in here while I abuse you.com because you're too bloody lazy to move yourself. Again, you're giving your body to a third party to take responsibility for your movement. We are lazy and we like convenience. So stretching can feel good, but so can taking cocaine. Stretching can feel good, but so is smoking cigarettes. We know the health hazards to these activities, and stretching is the same. You cannot stretch living tissue in any way. So then the question is, well, what's the difference between static and dynamic? Well, static is how you stretch beyond boundary. Dynamic is not stretching at all. It is a harmony of contractions. Your tissue is contracting as you're trying to dynamically move. So there's not stretching. You're trying to work within a harmony of playing your instrument between those myofascial relationships and how they're neurologically stimulating each other to create the right chemical response to move freely, to experience your own boundaries. Yes, if stretching worked, jiu-jitsu couldn't. You would never submit to taking your limbs to boundary. If stretching worked, no dancer or gymnast would ever be injured. If stretching worked, babies would fall from vaginas. They need to be pushed. You need to stimulate. You need to encourage. You need to repair. You need to look after your living tissue so it has the restorative nature to rebound back. And we know you create a neurological monosynaptic reflex arc that once you start stretching, you have to continue because the moment you stop, your body will defend itself by stiffening. And in that slide, when I said, how should I live? Is it with being bendy-wendy or built like a big tank? Well, the most loose and most flexible becomes stiffer than the most built. How about that? Because your body recognizes you've threatened it.
Yeah.
And it just is waiting for the opportunity to defend itself and stiffen because you compromise its actual survival architecture, its natural characteristics, its natural myofascial rhythms. So to finish on, think of this, guys. If you lose the spring in your step, there's no bounce, there's no bounding along. You're dragging your legs along the floor. You don't stride forward, you shuffle. Everything in your body to the cell in your eyeball is dysfunctional because it's all having to adapt to the fact that you lost the spring and the natural rebounding in your body, which then allows access to the energy-free recoiling in your living chirality tissue, which allows you to repattern and release unnecessary movement styles, which lets you restore optimally, which lets you refine and become skilled. All of that collapses once you lose rebound.
That's why I'm sat in the car.
Oh, somebody's sat in the car. Does that make sense? She's legging it. See, she's rebounding. She's gone. She's out of here.
All right,
Is
guys.
that help? Is that a helpful synopsis? If you have a superstar in there, a superstar ballerina, yes. Bear in mind, I've worked with superstar ballerinas and they're all crippled.
Yeah.
Every one of them. So it is a choice to cripple that child between you and them. It's your choice. You're the professional. They're your child in your guidance. You're making a conscious decision based on your understanding of living tissue. That's a choice. If they're a social dancer, make sure they're enjoying it. Dancing is meant to be beautiful and fun, and they should be able to do it as often as they bloody like without inhibiting their integrity of their young bodies, because eventually they'll become dysfunctional adults.
Thank you for the great questions, guys. That again, we only just touched the tip of the iceberg. And as Paul said, we explore different modalities of, yes, the dancer wants more range of motion at a certain joint, whether they need it or not. How are we going to do that? And what is the language we're going to use around that, since we don't particularly love the word joints? We are diving into all of that and more in Thrive. We actually have a whole module on joints, and it starts with there are no joints. So if you would like to join us, this is what you will get. You will get 12 training modules, which I've just got talk to you about. We do 6 live Q&As. You'll get downloadable notes similar to today's presentation. Those are for you to keep. And you get access to absolutely everything we do for 12 months afterwards, was because what we found is that people like to dip in and out. And maybe when they started module 1 and then went through and they've now finished their 12-week training with us, but actually they want to go back and watch module 1, they're going to absorb it and the information and develop on a different level. So that's why we want to have you inside of Thrive for a year, even though it is officially, if you like, a 12-week training. You will also get access to an exclusive Facebook group where Paul and I are on there every day. And if you have any questions or client experiences or even your own experiences that you want to share, you can dive into there. You might choose to buddy up. We've got a few, I think 3 or 4 of our last cohort that get together once a week and go over different exercises and different ideas that they've had. So everybody is in the same boat on that page. So it's actually a really lovely community. And one thing we started doing since our last intake, and it will happen again at the end of this intake, sometime during the summer, maybe towards the end of the year, is we have this Thrive alumni where we invite everybody back that has worked with us on Thrive before, again, to share, similar to what we did today, a bit of a chat, a bit of education, sharing experiences. I think we may tag a workout in on the end as well, or a movement session. So you get exclusive invites to that, because what we don't want this to become is come and join us for a set amount of time, and then we say bye-bye and we never hear or see from you or see of you again. That is the very opposite of what we want. We want to create this community where people keep coming back and flowing in and out and go, I've developed this, or I've gone in this direction with this client, and I've noticed so many differences in my own body from developing my training this way. So if you want to sign up today and grab one of the last remaining spots, I'm going to sweeten the deal and throw in Paul's exclusive stretching Why Not, which I believe was 60 minutes, but as you can tell, our 60 minutes often develops into 90.
We don't wear watches.
What's that?
We don't wear watches.
We don't wear watches. Those are overrated. I'm going to throw that in for you. So you've got 24 hours to sign up if you still want Paul's exclusive thing, and that will be a lifetime access deal. Now, we know that cash flow sometimes can be an issue. So we have tried our best. We can't go any better than that we're currently doing. Sure, if you want to give us all your money all at once, you can do that. No one's going to argue. But if you want to spread out your monthly payments for Thrive, then you can do that monthly over the year. And it actually adds up. We worked it out, didn't we, Paul? If you were charging appropriately at 2 clients a month.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cheapest tips. Cheapest tips.
Cheap as chips. And this is something where we've got people now coming back from our very first Thrive cohort, what would have been at the end of 2022, maybe beginning of 2023, I believe, saying, I'm still using this stuff every single day, and my clients have just grown and grown and grown. There's quite a few people that spring to mind that she said that the value this course gave me was just is invaluable. You can't put a price on it. So if you want to know more, guys, I'm going to put a link in the chat box right now, and that will take you to a page on the website called Thrive Mentorship. It will tell you everything you need to know and give you more information than I just have about Thrive, what's involved, the dates that we do our live Q&A, so you can already start to look at your diary and schedule them in if you choose to join us inside of Thrive. And also, if you wanted to know about the payment links or even join today, the information is there as well. As always, I'm always here to take your emails. So you guys all have my email. I sent out the reminders directly from that email today. It's victoria@victoriaroper.com. You can hit Paul up on Instagram. He loves a good Instagram chat. You can hit me up on Instagram as well. I'll try to respond to messages as soon as I can. And we just want to say thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us, or part of your afternoon with us. Thank you so much, Paul.
My pleasure. There's my email if you want it.
Yeah, there's Paul's email as well. Mine will be on the email that you had the link with for the email. And we hope to see you guys very, very soon. If not inside of Thrive, then in another workshop soon. Thanks, guys.